Okay, next up. Like I said, 4 stars on that. We have Assessment. This is directed by Fleur Fortune. Now, this is probably the biggest, I mean, it's not a biggest release. It's still an indie movie, I guess, or it's still a lower budget movie, but it's got some big names in it. So I don't know exactly the intent behind this. I feel like this is the kind of movie that probably they wanted to originally get a bigger release, but then just due to the nature of it, it doesn't quite fit into that category because this is not really a big movie kind of movie. This movie is Assessment. It has Elizabeth Olsen as Mia. It's got Alicia Vikander, which we know from Ex Machina, of course, as Virginia, and it's got Himesh Patel as Aaryan. And there's some other characters come in. Hardly any. It's really a three-hander. But there's a small scene where a bunch of other characters come into their house, and one of them is Minnie Driver, and it was like, oh, is that Minnie Driver? And I was excited to see her in there because Minnie Driver always is a great addition to a production. Interesting movie. Now, is it a good movie? And what is this movie? So, this is a movie that is like a kind of a post-apocalyptic movie of sorts. You find out really quickly. You see Elizabeth Olsen character is like walking back to their house. And it's very secluded, kind of in this countryside near the ocean. And then you hear something and you understand really quickly, like, oh, we're slightly in the future. This is a slightly post-apocalyptic future because there's stuff about a dome, atmospheric dome over where they live, over their area, which you get the idea, oh, okay, this is keeping things habitable, and outside of that dome must be less habitable. You don't see like a plastic dome, but there's kind of like a shimmer across the sky, kind of indicating that it's being kind of stuff's being held in there to keep it, like I said, more livable. She goes back. She's kind of living this life with her husband, and her husband, once again, Ariane, he seems to be a scientist. He's working on this. He has kind of this virtual reality room where he is trying to create perfect reproductions of animals. He's working on the fur of this chimpanzee that he's trying to. He'll have have this chimpanzee digitally or come up an AI version of it come up, but to the point where it's actually a physical manifestation in this room that he has. He can touch it, but he's like having problems getting the fur right. It doesn't feel right. It might look really, really accurate, like a real animal, but it doesn't feel quite right. And he's trying to get that perfected. She, on the other hand, has like a greenhouse, and she's working on constantly developing and nurturing all these different uh, plants for food and for atmosphere and for oxygen. So you can see that she's kind of doing that whole piece. And they're living together. And at the very beginning, a person shows up at their door, and it's the assessor, and that's Virginia, the Vikander character. And you find out basically right out of the gate, here's the concept of the movie. The assessor is there. They're going to be there for 7 days. They're going to assess if this couple is eligible to have a child. And in this future, like a lot of near futures, children being present or not being present or unable to be there seems to be a big kind of a big plot point, children of men being a very obvious example from the near past. And in this one, the way it works is they people, I believe, are kept on a drug, and the drug is to force people not to be able to have natural childbirth. And I guess the idea is to keep the population controlled. I'm not sure exactly. I didn't key in on that as much, but I guess that's the idea behind it. And then the government, which as time goes on, you get a feeling this government is pretty authoritarian, but in a very subtle way. You don't quite get the details, but it kind of creeps through in the way things are working here. But the idea is that if you are deemed after this assessment to be worthy of a child, they'll take your genetic materials, they will create a baby, essentially in a jar, and then you will be presented back with your baby. You don't get to have, 9 months of pregnancy or any of that stuff, but you are deemed worthy to have a baby made from your materials, and therefore it'll be actually your genetic child. Virginia, as the assessor, very cold right out the gate, coming in, she's judging the house, judging them, really gives us feel, almost kind of channeling her character in Ex Machina, almost robotic. You're almost wondering at the beginning, is she even a human being? Because of how cold she is. And this is one of those movies where once the assessment starts, there's as the movie goes on, it's day one, day two. And of course, there's 7 days. So the twist is right after she gets there and the next day they start, Alicia Vikander comes out and she's acting like a baby. full human being, Alicia, how she looks in real life, or Alicia. And she is like pushing things off the table, acting a little like a little kid, like a little baby in a chair, trying to be fed food that just is playing with it and throwing it around. And you're like, okay, I see what this is. She's gonna go through the stages of childhood to see if they can handle it. And it becomes this really strange social experiment of a movie where it's like, first of all, you have to believe that Alicia Vikander's character, Virginia, is such a great actor, and I guess that's why she's hired as an assessor, that she will just go through all of these things and to some degree, not mentally test their ability as parents, but almost torture them as human beings psychologically. And then on the other side of things, you have to believe that they would put up with that. And I think that's the negative side of things is it's pretty far-fetched and it really is very to some degrees it's kind of predictable because you kind of know the kinds of things that are probably going to happen because you think like, well, what's the big things that happen when a kid grows up? What is going to probably happen with these characters? And you kind of foresee some of those things happening. But on the plus side, these actors are so bought in and are so good at what they do that to really sell these scenes that on their own they're pretty engaging and I kept thinking I was going to be out on this movie and it kept like in the to Godfather 3 fashion it kept pulling me back. No, I'm not going to do my Al Pacino. Sorry, you can do it in your head. So ultimately, this movie won me over. And it's kind of heavy. It's kind of very self-serious. It takes you could very much think it's pretentious. It's not going to be for the people who want like more like fun sci-fi movie. It's very in up its own butt on that kind of stuff. It really, like I said, takes itself seriously. But it also, I think, does its job, which is if you're watching this movie or watching this movie with another person, you are going to talk about it. You are going to talk about the things it brings up. And I think it will work as far as a, tipping off point for some of these interesting social issues. Or if nothing else, like me, you're gonna be like, how are they putting up with this lady? Why is she doing this? What is wrong with her? And there are a couple of scenes at the very, very end that kind of do sort of answer that question and makes Virginia's character really kind of interesting. And in some ways, I think she is the most interesting character. She ends up becoming the why is she doing what she's doing to such degree? And why would the government want her to do it? Or is she going rogue? You know? So in that aspect, I really enjoyed that part of the movie a lot. Like I said, I was frustrated parts of this movie, but also enjoying parts of this movie. So I kind of kept going back and forth. Am I recommending it? Am I hating it? Am I recommending it? So I was gonna go just 3 stars, but I think it's good enough. I think there's enough great stuff here. But I'm gonna go 3.5 stars for people who want original, quote, serious idea, generated sci-fi. I think this is a pretty good one that will probably go under a lot of people's radar. In fact, it probably would totally go under people's radar if it weren't for the name actors involved. I think that's going to help it a little bit, but still, it's going to be like, what is this movie? And it's worth checking out.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this video. For more movie and television reviews and interviews, please subscribe to my Deepest Dream channel. Like, comment, share, subscribe. And as always, thanks so much for your support. Take care.